Welcome to the Maasto Fitness podcast. Today, in episode 20, I'm going to talk about what I eat around racing and why. So, this is a quick hit podcast. Keep them short and to the point, focusing on the things you can do off the bike to race faster and safer. At Maasto Fitness, we work with racers remotely in the real world. Many have a life full of commitments and don't have a ton of time to train on the bike or ride. So, we provide training off the bike so that days on the bike, whether riding or racing, are faster and safer. And we're going to hop right into what I do for fueling myself around racing in the days leading up, the morning of the race, during a race, and then after the race. Now, this is something I just get a lot of questions about. People always want to know, what do I do? Why do I do it? What do I have for this situation? What do I have for that situation? And I will say every racer is different. What they like, how their stomach reacts to foods, when they need to kind of eat to meet their personal physiology, if they have a little bit more of a nervous stomach or if they don't. And then, what type of racing they're doing. All those are going to play into what they have. So what I have is not more than likely going to be right for you or what works for you, but I'm hoping that by me going through this will help give you some insight on the things you can do to fuel yourself better around races. Now at Maasto Fitness, we have worksheets for all of our racers that go through this, that explain what we're looking for in terms of the size of meal we need, the size of snacks we need, what type of fueling we need while we're racing, and then examples, and then they can use those worksheets and build it all themselves. And each of those resources at Maasto Fitness come with a video of myself or either my wife, Coach Carly, explaining the worksheet as well and the resources so that there's no confusion and you're able to build the absolute best fueling for you. Now, we'll go ahead and jump into mine. And this is something that's been refined over the years. It hasn't stayed the same. It's kind of evolved. And I found that, as I age, what worked before doesn't work now. And I've had to make little refinements. And I think that's important with any type of fueling situation you have for yourself. Don't expect what worked last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago to work now. It may work, but it may not. And if things aren't feeling the same or you're not feeling as good, you might want to go through and reassess what you did. And I know for me personally, it's always just keeping notes. I try to keep good notes of this stuff. So there's less screwing around, trying to figure it out. There's less guesswork. I have a clear, concise plan of what I did, what I'm doing, and if I change things, what I'm going to do. So when things work or don't work, I know exactly what I did, and then I can just limit the most unknowns for myself and try to always have the best plan of action. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. If you don't know me, I'm an off-road racer. I race hare scrambles and enduros. So in terms of the fueling side, this is a pretty good amount of fuel, keeping myself pretty fueled up for longer endurance events beforehand and making sure I'm fueling afterwards. And then, of course, during those type of events, you also need fuel. If you're racing motocross or sprint enduros, your fueling might not be as robust, but the pieces, the ideas are still very similar. So still lots that can be learned here. So in the days leading up, about 3 or 4 days before the event, I slowly start to taper fiber. So I just don't have as much fiber. Fiber is a really important part of our diet, something we absolutely need for a healthy diet. But as we get closer to a race, it's not a bad idea to taper fiber because fiber sets in our gut longer and it can increase the chances of GI distress. So like I said, a couple days out, I just quit eating such robust salads or leafy greens. Still have a little bit, nothing that I cut out of my diet in those days leading up. But I definitely have less just to help limit GI distress and make sure my gut is going to be cleared out on race day. And then also in those days leading up, I'm actively staying hydrated. I'm not like drinking, just chugging water all the time. I'm just making sure I'm actively staying hydrated. And a good way to know if you're properly hydrated is to check the color of your urine. So we don't want clear urine. That's a little bit too diluted, kind of getting close to that overhydrated status, but a light amber is ideal. So depending on what you do during the day, your situation, if you're out in the heat or if you're in a warmer environment, you may find that you need to drink a lot more fluid to start topping off that system. But that's what we want to do leading up. We want to start to top off the system or start to fill it up so it's topped off on race day. We can't the night before or race morning chug a ton of water and expect to be hydrated. That's not the way the body works. So like I said, in those days leading up, I'm just actively staying hydrated, making sure I'm doing the right things to keep my body topped off. And then the day before, I switched from water to some sports drink. So the day before, I have 1 to 2 sports drinks, just depending on how hot it is. If it's hotter, I have a little more sports drink. If it's not hot, I don't. And the deal is there, I'm trying to top off the electrolyte stores, those minerals as well in my body, so that sodium, potassium, and calcium that's in a sports drink kind of help top those off in my body, make sure things are at the proper range. Our body can only absorb so much of those, but I'm definitely giving it the opportunity to absorb more if needed right before the race, the day before. And then going into dinner. So the night before the race, I like to keep things pretty simple. For dinner the night before the race, I don't really have any fiber. I stay away from leafy greens and veggies, and I don't have a ton of fruit just because I've learned that for myself over time, GI issues definitely come up if I'm not careful. And that's one thing that I know I can control. So I'm going to go ahead and just pretty much not have any fiber the night before the meal before the meal the night before the race. That was a tough one to get out. But what I am going to do is I'm going to have a mostly carbohydrate dinner. Now, what I mean by that is the size of my meal is the same. So if I were to look at my plate, I would have the same amount of food on there as any other meal. But I'm going to have more of my meal be carbohydrates. And the reason for that is that our body can store through our liver and our muscle glycogen about 1,000 calories of energy through carbohydrates that we can use while we're racing. So I want to top those stores off by having more carbohydrates. When we're racing, competing, and this is any distance from motocross, sprint, enduro, hare scramble, whatever discipline it may be, our body uses a mix of carbohydrates and fats. No matter how lean of a racer you may be, we have unlimited fat stores. We're good for that for our type of racing. What we do need is carbohydrates, and we can only store so much. So we need to fuel the body up, and then we need to supplement with it during race day, which I'll get into a little bit more here when we jump to the next day. But for that meal the night before, I'm trying to top off those stores. So I'm making sure that I have topped off my carbohydrate store. So my dinner is pretty simple, easy to digest, mostly carbohydrate, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat. For me, that meal is almost always rice or quinoa, and then chicken or tofu. Really simple. So everything works well with me. It's easily digestible. It's lots of carbohydrates, a little protein to help keep me full and help curb my appetite. That protein doesn't really play a big factor into the next day, but just protein in our diet, always important. Same with a little bit of fat, important. And so I make sure to have a little protein and a little bit of fat as well, just to help keep the meal healthy and to help curb my appetite, because that protein and fat is also going to help make you feel full. Also, we'll have a piece of toast or 2 or maybe 3 if I'm really hungry, and then often a piece of fruit. So simple as that. I have that meal. Normal time I would have dinner. Normal size of meal, just more of its carbohydrate. Usually a good portion of that is rice or quinoa, and then some chicken and tofu, a couple pieces of bread, depending on how I'm feeling. And then, like I said, a piece of fruit. So that's the night before the race. Now, race morning, and I am, for this example, talking about hare scrambles and enduro, so races that take a couple hours of straight racing. So a lot of demand is put on the body for fuel. And like I said, we can only store so much. So I once again want to make sure those stores are topped off. My body burnt calories overnight, just doing all the things it has to do to help repair my body when I'm getting that good REM sleep in the night before the race, making sure I'm doing everything I can. So race morning, 4 hours before the race, I have 1 cup of oatmeal with a little bit of peanut butter, a little bit of protein powder, some fruit in it. Like it could be like literally 2 bananas, cup and a half of blueberries, raspberries, kind of like whatever's in season, and honestly, whatever my wife picked up from the store that week. And then my regular amount of coffee, water, and then if I'm hungry still, a piece of plain toast. Nothing even exciting, just plain toast. And so that breakfast is hitting all those things I talked on the night before: high carbohydrate, low fiber. I'm making sure to keep myself hydrated. I'm having my normal amount of coffee because that's a big one. If you're a habitual coffee drinker, definitely don't do anything different on race day. So I drink coffee every day. I'm not going to do anything different on race day. I'm going to get in the same amount of coffee because my body's used to it. It's expecting it. And oatmeal, protein powder, peanut butter, all the normal things I do, fruit, so it's nothing new and unexpected for my body. Tried and true, something I know works for me day in, day out, race weekends, whatever. Now that protein powder and peanut butter, little amount on there. Not a factor in this meal. Like I said before, protein, fat, which that protein powder and peanut butter are going to fill those two categories. Important part of your normal diet, but for race morning, really just helping curb the appetite. Because I got 4 hours till I race, I want to pop off my system, but I also don't want to be heading to the starting line thinking I'm hungry or feeling like I'm hungry, because that's never a good place to be. So that's what I have. And then I have some water, nothing crazy, because I've been hydrating in the days leading up. I don't need a crazy amount of water. Just keeping an eye on that urine, making sure it's that light amber. Now, between then and the race, I will sip on a sports drink. Nothing I force down, because I'm just kind of monitoring my pee and my urine color and how I feel, but making sure I'm just getting in those electrolytes and that little bit of calorie drip from the sports drink as the morning's ticking on, getting closer to the race. And then 90 minutes before the race, I will have a plain bagel. Sometimes I will also have an energy gel, like a GU or a Hammer gel or a Morton gel. But I'll always have that bagel. And then it just depends if I'm feeling like a little peckish, I'll have an energy gel as well. So then that's what I have leading up. I personally don't have anything after that point. I feel like I fueled my body well. I've made sure everything's topped off. And often I feel pretty solid. I don't feel overfull, and I definitely don't feel hungry by the time I get to the starting line. So that's worked well for me. And that snack, once again, that plain bagel, really simple, easy, digestible carbohydrates. Definitely nothing exciting to eat, but it's done the job many times for me. Now we get to the race. Like I said, I'm doing a multi-hour race, and I'm always aiming to get in 250 calories an hour and ideally 25 ounces of fluid an hour at least. As temperature increases, I definitely try to increase that as best I can, depending on pit stops, fueling opportunities, my hydrator, temperature, all of that. But I'm aiming for at least 25 ounces of fluid an hour. So for the calories, I personally use Grupo Nutrition. I found it works really well for me. Just a good, clean, solid sports drink. They're actually out of Windsor, Ontario. Not a huge sports nutrition company, but good stuff. I find it works good for me. Flavor's not too intense. Got a good, solid amount of calories in it. And then I do supplement that with some sodium. I had some sodium testing done a couple of years ago. Found out that I do need a little more than kind of what's standard for many people, which saying standard is pretty blanket statement because we're all very unique in our physiology and our needs. But I found I need more than pretty much most sports drinks provide. So I also have extra sodium added in with my sports drink. And then at gas stop, I try to always have at least a gel, and I mix that gel with some water because many gels, almost all of them, need to be mixed with water for your body to absorb it. You can't have just the gel. So I already mix it in a bottle with a straw. So at a gas stop, I'm able to just suck that gel down. It's already the right concentration with fluid, easier to get down and keep me fueled and keep me going. So that's my fueling for the race. It can vary a little bit depending on if it's a hair scramble or an enduro and the stops and pit stops and all that, but that's pretty close. I mean, I think the main takeaway there is it's simple carbohydrates, nothing else. It's providing energy to keep our system going. Making sure there's sodium in it or those electrolytes in general, because that's what helps the muscles work and our body be able to absorb the fluid and energy we're giving it to it, helping it deliver it to the body. So that's a big one. And then the fluid, because while we're racing, we lose fluid through sweat, through our body trying to cool itself. And we need to make sure we are constantly refueling our body with fluid, because once we get to a point where we're too dehydrated, for example, if we get to 2% dehydrated, performance starts to decrease. We get to 4% dehydrated. We're at the point of no return, which means your tongue is in your spokes. You're at a place that if you got food or fluid or fuel, you're not going to bounce back in time, and it starts to get kind of dangerous for you. So I make sure I got that fluid rolling all the time. Now, post-race, for me, often pretty beat post-race. Doesn't matter how fit I was, the conditions, whatever. I'm always trying to give it my best. So the tank in terms of my body is always empty. Food never sounds good. But what I have found works for me is a nice cold smoothie made up of protein powder and frozen fruit. And what I personally do is I make this the night before, put it in a cooler. I don't have anything cool like a motorhome or a fun mover camper or anything. So I make it the night before, put it in a cooler, and then after the race, I get that down immediately. For as a male, I have a 45-minute window to refuel my body, to help refuel those muscle stores and everything I've just worked so hard to help repair and start the recovery process for my body. Like I said, nothing ever really sounds good, but I know that's one thing I can do. So that's like a quick 400 calories I can get in my body immediately to start that process and to start help me feeling better, because I need to start packing and getting ready to go and then drive home. And I don't want that drive to be just like a suffer fest like it used to be for me long ago, before I was in the health and fitness world and before I understood fueling. So I get that in and I start rehydrating. If you are racing, essentially every pound you lose is about 16 ounces of fluid while you're racing. So for me, I can easily lose 5 pounds while I'm racing for a couple hours. Could be up to 10 realistically, depending on extreme conditions. And so I'm also starting to rehydrate. I'm not going crazy chugging water, but I'm starting to actively drink fluid to start rehydrate my body and ensure I'm feeling better, start get that blood volume back up, start helping remove some waste from my body. So I also start rehydrating. Then once I start to feel well enough, I do eat a real meal as well. But I make sure first to get in that post-race smoothie and just start jumping the process and getting myself feeling better, even though it very rarely sounds good. And so there you have it. That's what I do from leading up to through the race to after. All of this for me is something I really thought out over time. It's worked for me. I like to keep things really simple. I feel like when I'm at the races, I'm talking to this person, I'm talking to that person, I'm doing this. I'm inspecting like 5 little things on my bike that I already know are perfect, but I'm still just thinking about and want to look at them again. And so meals and timing can be challenging. So I pre-make everything before I head to the track. I found that for me, that works the best, keeps things simple. I don't have to say, oh, I need to mix my hydrator. Oh, I need to make my breakfast. I need to make my smoothie after the race. I do all of that the day before. So when I'm there on race day, for me, I'm just able to open my cooler, grab exactly what I need, get it in, put it through my system, and I'm done. There's no thinking. On race day, there's already a lot of distractions and a lot of things we're trying to do. And if you're like me, sometimes my wife says I'm turning into a spaceman closer to a race because I'm just starting to think about the race and how I want to execute and what I want to do. I need to minimize everything I can. And so for me, making all this before really helps me just stay on point and ensures that I'm doing everything I can, keep my fueling on point and doing what I know works for me. So like I said, fueling works different for everyone. You got to find what works for you. Hopefully these examples were beneficial to you and gave you some ideas, or maybe are going to help you rethink your fueling. And if you want more help with that, you can reach out to us at Maasto Fitness. We've got lots of resources, programs, and we can help get you on point. Now, next week, I'm going to talk about lower back pain for racers. Strength mobility training is something that will really help. A lot of racers deal with lower back pain while they're racing. And if not properly taken care of, it can turn into a chronic injury, as in something you deal with long-term. And so we want to help avoid that. And I'm going to talk about the things you can do to avoid that in the long term. And like I said, at Maasto Fitness, we build strength, endurance, and mobility training for racers and riders, and have tons of resources on hydration, nutrition, and fueling. So if you want to give it a try, send me a message on Instagram. I'll hook you up with a free week of our single jump training program. See you guys next week.